Our first item on the agenda is a presentation from the clerks of the court on a continuing appropriation funding proposal that they are bringing forth. The Honorable Karen Rushing, who is the Sarasota County Clerk of the Court, will be speaking on behalf of the 67 clerks throughout the state. And Ms. Rushing, you are recognized.
Some background on the Clerk of the Court's funding. I know that you all have a copy of the presentation here, so I will walk you through some of the highlights. As you know, clerks of the court are county officers, and they provide services both to the county government and to the courts in their jurisdiction, whether it be circuit or county. And this has been going on since the first Constitution, since 1845. Historically, clerks have been funded by fines and fees, with additional revenues as needed to carry out their responsibilities by counties. And this worked for a very long time, 150 years, and then there was a revision to the Constitution, and we all remember that, Revision 7, Article 5, which was adopted in 1998 and then implemented in 2004, which required the state to fund the court system. With the implementation of Revision 7, clerk's base budget was founded on the previous year. So now I'm talking about the significant change that took place with Revision 7 back in 2004, and those budgets were adjusted annually by increasing or decreasing based upon the revenue collections. And so that budget model basically ebbed and flowed with the revenue source that was received by the clerks. So 2009, the legislature responded by eliminating that revenue-based budget process and placed the clerks into the General Appropriations Act and fixed the budget amount at 17% lower than what the budget had previously been. And so in that process, there was the development of some unit cost concept, a $80 transfer from the filing fees from the clerks to the court's trust fund, and the imposition of a statutory 8% service charge. And these changes combined really a negative impact to the clerk's operation with respect to revenues by about $70 million. So in the last three sessions, as you probably are painfully aware, you have had to provide emergency mid-year appropriations to keep the clerk's offices open and accessible to the public. And that's been about an average of $37 million a year from the general revenue. We're asking for a continuation appropriation budget, which is currently provided for by statute and is utilized by the legislature in many areas, but one in particular is the retirees for the Florida retirement system. The clerk budget would remain in the legislature appropriation process. It's designed to stabilize the funding of the clerks and to continue to give the legislature the appropriate control that it believes it needs over the funding of this office. It is designed also to have a small increase if the revenues increase to address any increasing workload, and it also, as the old model did, goes in reverse if we have a decline, a small decline in revenue and in workload, then the budget is adjusted as well. The clerk's budget would still be subject to any adjustments that the legislature chose to make. You know your process better than I do, and the authorities that you have. It would remain the clerk's responsibility to pursue revenue collections, and the clerks would be limited by the lesser of the continued appropriation on the actual revenues. So we have an incentive to continue to pursue collections. The proposal also prevents the legislature from having to make emergency mid-year appropriations from the GR. We are asking to be exempt from the 8% service charge by specifying that we are exempt, and also that the $80 from the filing fees be redirected back to the clerk's trust fund. And it would also provide us with the much-needed predictability about our revenue source so that we can provide adequate service to the public. So that concludes my remarks, and if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them if I can.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We appreciate the presentation. Does anybody on... Okay, Senator Dean, you're
What I'm
recognized.
trying to get to, I want to make it as easy as possible for the clerks to be able to go back and work out of the trust fund on a draw system appropriate to their needs.
Right.
You know, I'm well aware of the fact that we had clerks that were bankrupt, literally, in their counties, and it's ridiculous to have, you know, a constitutional officer in this position, and it's our fault. I want to say this beginning because we, the legislature, started, was 07, 08, is when they, I call it the witch hunt, started about all of this stuff. So we need to get back to stability, and the stability is in the fee that you're collecting and you're holding in abeyance for all of us to have to not worry about that public funding, then you would be able to draw against it appropriately.
Correct, and we also, in this proposal, eliminate that unit cost correction because, as you know, when the revenue comes in, it's to service not only the new case, but all the cases in the pipeline. So just because there's a blip in the incoming cases doesn't mean there's a slowdown in the pipeline. So that revenue is needed. It can't be adjusted in the fourth quarter.
How often do we go back and revisit this issue now legislatively to make sure that you're happy and that we're covering your cost of operation and that we don't have to be doing this every year?
Well, the continuation approach is designed so that base is taken care of. If other matters occur where resources are, I'm going to make this up, if there's a need for more judicial support, judges, and the legislature appropriates money for that, then we would have to come back to you in a budget process and ask for that additional, because the base that we're asking for today and a continuation process would not accommodate those kinds of changes. So we'd be back before you asking for that.
Do you have adequate protection in your budget to protect the clerk from any type of overlap or override from court functions that might inhibit or cause you a problem in this budget?
Well, the model is designed that allows us to appeal to this to the Senate with respect to what's adequate, because that's the most important thing. The baseline has to be adequate so that you can address those issues. And in the model, we're talking about how it works, not yet what the dollar amount is for adequate.
Thank you, ma'am.
Vice Chair.
Thank you. In the event the legislature certifies additional judges based on the recommendation that we received from the Supreme Court, did you envision what then would be necessary for you to have adequate funds to deal with those additional judges?
Well, with respect to the model, I'll go back and say that we would have to approach the legislature for the resource, because the model approach is a continuation approach that says today, if all things stay equal, we need this every day to operate, to perform our duties.
My concern is that we certify some judges and then you don't have adequate resources and you have to come back, but session's over, and then you're operating without adequate funds unless you have it in your contingency or your reserves.
Okay, so I had whispered in my ear, and I apologize, I didn't know it ahead of time, but there is a provision that allows for the LBC to be approached to address something that may have happened that we didn't know was going to occur, but now has a financial impact.
Questions for the Honorable Karen Rushing? Thank you, Ms. Rushing.
Thank you for your time.